If you look at history at any point in time, you'll see a world that is riddled with philosophy. From Greek philosophers to modernity, there's always going to be someone asking questions, looking for change and solution to the world's problems. Today, I will be looking at 3 different focuses on isms that showed significant importance in history. We will go over the definition, the origin, the evolution, and the modern-day look behind each philosophy. The isms that were selected for analyzation were highlighted in the CHY 4UV course mandated by the Canadian government. Those highlighted include nationalism, feminism, and liberalism. With each philosophy, we will also be focusing on the perspective of significant figures that made development within each respected area. This can be the inventor to revolutionizer to how modern day visions it. Throughout this video essay, I'll be looking at the significance of perspective and how one ideation looked at from a different lens can alter the course of history. The simple definition: the loyalty and devotion to a nation. Nationalism creates a community within a nation. This community is bonded and based on similarity and common interests. In a lot of ways, nationalism is great to have. You can see modern examples of nationalism in good old USA, the land of free. However, there have been countless reports of nationalism causing wars, revolutions, and other types of conflicts. The start of nationalism is credited to the late 18th century following the French Revolution. We all know the story. King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, lavish-lustered royalty turned into Europe's most hated. But how did this spark the beginning of nationalism? You can point to the storm of Bastille. Due to the lack of food and the lack of rights peasants had, they stormed the Bastille. This acted as a symbolic move towards the French government, which later pushed the royals out to Paris. Following came the National Convention, also known as the First Republic of France. This was founded for the sole purpose of abolishing the monarchy and bringing France to a new beginning under a new governing system. This demonstrated nationalism as the entirety of France's population revolted together against the monarchy to bring in the republic. They would use symbols amongst the population of France, such as the tricolor flag and the Marseillaise anthem. Directly following the French Revolution, the Republic of France took charge, and with that came Napoleon Bonaparte. The French emperor is the pinnacle of nationalism. He strategized his expansionism within Europe by claiming that France had the right to spread the light and knowledge upon others. In France, to this day, there are a plethora of street names and statues that still exist in his days of ruling France. The population of France, for the most part, enjoyed Napoleon. He had the French ideals come first and always fought for his country's rights. He stabilized the economy and created a penal code that is still used by the French to this day. On January 22, 1905, over 100,000 Russians marched to the Tsar's Winter Palace to make demands. They did this as the government, under the leadership of the Tsar, was becoming more corrupt than ever before. He was more obsessed with continuing his bloodline than achieving victory in wars with Japan. Because of this, and the rise of Vladimir Lenin and his communist views, the demands were made. Instead of the public being able to list their requests, imperial forces under the Tsar opened fire onto the crowd. So 2 perspectives can come from this. First, why would the Tsar's men open fire on the crowd? Personally, I'm not too sure. It could have been a safety issue, but even then, it seems so unnecessary to shoot your citizens, especially when you're not winning the popularity contests. Secondly, why would they march the streets to demands? This question is easier to answer as we have already gone over it before. The government was corrupt and new ideologies were being thrown up in the air. The world wars undoubtedly showed nationalism. Every country that was involved was ready to fight for their homeland and would do whatever it took to reach the end goal. Not just that, but nationalism also caused a source of confidence that one had for its country. You can also argue that nationalism was pushed and taken as a safety aspect. You don't want to be ruled over someone potentially worse, one that would harm you and the people that you love. You can think of the people's perspective by imagining how you would think during the time if you were in their positions. Me personally, I would never want another country, especially one that has worse ideologies and would cause harm to me, to take over and rule the country that I was raised to love. Nationalism to this day is still alive and thriving. In fact, I'd say that it's one of our lead motivators to pride and hope within a country. We can see examples of this in modern days in politics when the USSR collapsed after the Cold War. We can also see this within sporting events, such as the Olympics or the IIHF events, where countries go head-to-head against each other to win pride for one's nation. Feminism, a series of social movements and political campaigns, tackles topics that regard women's rights throughout history, such as the equality of sexes, recognition of women's rights, and the empowerment of women. Mary Wollstonecraft, a renowned 18th century writer and philosopher, was recognized as the pioneer of feminism by many. Her notable contribution lies in her influential work titled A Vindication of the Rights of Woman. In the late 18th century, Mary, alongside of her friend Fanny, opened a school for women. This provided profit until Fanny died, in which Mary left the school, moved to Ireland, and later moved back to Britain. Here she would write studies that challenged the thinking towards women at the time, including her most influential work in A Vindication of Rights of Women. This trailblazing book laid out the foundations to what is now known as the feminist theory. Because of the exclusion of women at the proceedings at a World Anti-Slavery Convention, Katie, along with Lucretia Mott, held the first women's rights convention at Seneca Falls, New York. With 300 people attending, this was the first event of many, and sparked of decades of activism within the world of feminism. In the year 1869, we saw the first women's suffrage law passed in Wyoming, which became the first state to allow women to vote. This occurs months following the foundation of national women's suffrage. The first wave of feminism can be credited to the foundation of the National Women's Suffrage Association. Created by a longtime activist Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, this movement was focused on women's right to vote, but was not limited to, as it also spoke about freedom and equality of men and women. On October 16, 1916, the first birth control clinic was opened by Margaret Sanger. It was quickly deemed illegal under the Comstock laws, which forbid birth control, and was threatened with legal action if not closed immediately. It was raided on October 26, 1916, but despite this, Sanger fought to keep her clinic open. After it was eventually forced to close, Sanger founded the American Birth Control League. Amelia Earhart was the first female aviator to fly solo across the Atlantic without stopping. Amelia Earhart was a pioneer of early aviation. Breaking countless records throughout her lifespan as an aviator, she paved the way for early women to show that they can succeed in careers primarily male-dominated. Noted to be the first female self-made millionaire in America, Madam C.J. Walker developed a line of beauty care products intended for black women. As a philanthropist, Walker opened several distribution centers, a cosmetology school, and funded foundations that primarily targeted women, children, and migrants. The vision that was thought by women at the time, and the leading argument for first-wave feminists, was that women were only inferior due to the lack of education. If this education would be provided, then they'd have something to do other than staying home with the kids, which was turning them into quote-unquote tyrants within the home, according to Mary Wollstonecraft. Men found this idea laughable, and support only came from private letters that had to be collected by others to share. Even when men were to support feminism, they certainly wouldn't label themselves as feminists. And this support was not always even throughout, as some would only support white women during this process. Emerging in the 1960s, second-wave feminism focuses on inequalities within the workplace, reproductive rights, and domestic violence. In 1963, John F. Kennedy, former President of the United States, passed the Equal Pay Act and officially declared it as law. This act declared that men and women would be given equal pay for the same work. Following this also came the Educational Amendment of 1972, which helped women in events of family leave or assault within the workplace. Roe v. Wade is the name given to the Constitution that in 1973 gave women the right to abortion. Following the case between Norma McCorvey and Henry Wade, the Supreme Court justified that criminalizing abortion violated a constitutional right to privacy. Unfortunately, in more recent years, we have seen cases like Roe v. Wade be analyzed again by the Supreme Court, and like this one, be overturned. It is argued by many that we're still in third wave feminism, which originated in the 90s, but some believe that we entered the fourth wave of feminism in the early 2010s, with the widespread use of social media. The topic is still up for debate. The third wave of feminism focuses on similar issues as the second wave, such as the desire for women to be seen as human beings instead of objects, and to be treated equally in the workforce. Third wave feminism is famous for the many punk bands that emerged in the 90s advocating for women's rights, such as Bratmobile and Riot Girl and Bikini Kill. The belief that every society should be based off individual freedom, liberalism, ideates that every individual has the right to life, liberty, and property. Liberalism is the opposite of a monarchy. With a monarchy, they can pass decisions unchecked. No one is able to protect the life and liberty of the citizens if one were to be corrupt or fail. This can be seen in the most modern-day dictatorships. With a liberalist society, their main concern is the life and liberty of the citizens. To achieve this, the government does not have full control, but has institutions within that are able to check on the power. John Locke created the ideologies for modern liberalism. However, liberalism has been around precursing Anno Domini. The abolition of feudalism during the French Revolution was a turning point where liberalism prevailed in the 18th century France. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, a document that was created during the French Revolution, was used to battle against the oppression that the government had for its citizens. The idea of freedom and equal rights is an exact example of liberalism. In 1929, the Wall Street stock market crashed in the USA. As liberalism is dependent on business and the economy, this crash affected it negatively. The business cycle was used to a boom and bust mentality, but with the stock market crash, there has only been a regression. This caused questions to be formed surrounding the longevity of liberalism, but this lasted until Theodore Roosevelt had an idea. As Theodore Roosevelt wanted equality within capital and labor, he created the square deal theory. This is based off of three basic ideas. Number one, the conservation of natural resources. Number two, the control of corporations. And number three, consumer protection. This took the special treatment away from larger capitalist companies and held all corporations on the same level. Modern liberalism to this day is shown all over the world. The modern form ideologies include having access to education, healthcare, fair wages, and equality of all. To end this, I would like to say thank you for watching and sticking around throughout the presentation on the three ideologies that I explained today. A lot of work was put into this, and I had a blast researching these topics to share.